The night was dark and cold. No moon in the sky, no sound in the air, only the quiet clinking of chains breaking the silence. Lyra, the alien woman, lay on the cold metal tracks, her wrists and ankles tied tightly. She couldn't move, her body weak, her skin pale and bruised. The poison they gave her made it hard to think clearly. But one thought stayed in her heart, her daughter. She tried to lift her head, but the world spun. She could feel the steel beneath her, cold and unforgiving. She had been betrayed by her own people, by those she once called family, they said. She was a traitor, they said. She helped the humans. But all she did was save a dying child, a human child, and for that, they punished her like this. Lyra of the Xyrith. The voice had said earlier, cold and cruel. You chose humans over your kind, so now die like them under the wheels of your own mercy. Then they laughed, turned away, and left her there. Left her on the forgotten train tracks that no one used anymore, or so she thought. Her breathing was slow, her body shaking, her mind whispered, this is the end, but still, she held on. Held on for her daughter, for the hope that maybe someone would come, maybe. A low rumble broke. The silence, Lyra's eyes widened, her heart beat faster. Was that a train? No, no one said trains still ran here. No one used this path since the war, but the rumble grew louder. The tracks began to vibrate. She tried to scream, but her voice came out as a whisper. Tears rolled down her cheeks, glowing faintly. In the dark, she didn't want to die like this, not like this. She wasn't ready. Till she saw her daughter again. Suddenly, a light, a small sharp beam shining from a distance. Footsteps, heavy, human. Someone was coming. Was it another enemy? Or was it? The footsteps stopped just beside her. A man gasped. What the? He dropped to his knees, checked her pulse, looked at her face. His hand hovered over her chains, unsure what to do. Then he saw the blood and burn marks. This wasn't a trap. This was real. Hey, can you hear me? I asked, his voice shaky but kind. Lyra looked at him, her lips trembling. Help. Please, she whispered. That was all he needed. He pulled out a metal cutter from his backpack and started cutting through the chains. The rumble of the train grew louder. The light of the engine was now visible, coming fast. Come on, come on. The man muttered, working faster. One chain snapped. Then another. He pulled her up, slung her weak body over his shoulder, and ran. Just as the train thundered past the spot where she had been lying, the force of the passing train shook the ground, but the man didn't stop. He ran until the noise was gone, until the stars were above them again, silent and still. He laid her down gently on a patch of grass. His heart was pounding. His clothes soaked in sweat. Who did this? To you? He asked. Lyra didn't answer, her eyes slowly closing. But just before she lost consciousness, she whispered one word. Daughter. The man blinked, confused and concerned. Then he stood up, looked around, and picked her up again. I don't know who you are, he said quietly, but you're not dying tonight. He turned and began walking through the woods toward his small, hidden cabin. The stars watched silently from above. The same stars that once saw Lyra chained for her kindness, now saw her being carried by the very kind she was punished for helping. Tonight, a story began. Not of war or betrayal, but of a second chance and the strange, dangerous bond between a human man and an alien woman with no one left to trust. Derek lived alone in the forest. He had no family, no friends, no real reason to be in this part of the world. People called him strange. Some even called him a ghost. But he didn't care. All he wanted was peace and silence, until tonight. He had found the alien woman chained to the train tracks, and now she was sleeping on his bed. Inside his small wooden cabin, wrapped in a warm blanket, Her breathing soft and steady, Derek sat nearby, still in shock. Her skin had strange patterns, glowing softly in the candlelight. She wasn't human, that was clear, but she had bled. Like a human, cried like a human, begged like one too. He poured hot water into a cup and sat on the floor beside the bed. She had whispered daughter before fainting. What did that mean? Was she a mother? Were others in danger too? I looked at her again, the bruises on her face, the dry blood around her wrists. Who could do this to someone? Even if she wasn't human, no one deserved that kind of pain outside. The wind howled through the trees. Inside, the room stayed quiet. Suddenly, she moved, her eyes opening slightly. They were bright blue with a faint glow. She gasped and tried to sit up, but winced in pain. Easy, Derek said. Raising his hands, you're safe here. She stared at him, confused and scared. Where am I? She asked weakly. My cabin, deep in the woods, he replied. I found you on the train tracks. Her breathing became heavy, panic in her voice. The train. My chains. You're okay, he said softly. I got you. Off the tracks just in time, she looked down at her hands, still trembling. I shouldn't be alive. She whispered. Well, you are, Derek said, trying to offer a small smile. You saved me, she said slowly. Still unsure if this was real? Derek nodded. Yeah, I guess I did. There was silence for a while. Then Derek stood up and handed her the warm cup of water. She hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. Her lips touched the rim of the cup, and she drank slowly. After a few sips, she asked, Why? Derek looked confused. Why? What? Why did you save me? I'm not one of you, she said. He leaned back in his chair. I don't know, he replied. I just saw someone in pain, someone about to die, and I couldn't walk away. Her eyes softened, but there was still fear in them. My name is Lyra, she said finally. Derek nodded. Derek, why were you out there? He asked carefully. She looked away, her face falling. They betrayed me, she said. Her voice cold now, my own kind. They said I was a traitor for saving a human child. Derek blinked, surprised. You saved a human kid. She nodded. Yes, and for that, they took my daughter. Derek's jaw clenched. He didn't know much about alien politics, but this sounded cruel. Where is she now? He asked. Taken, Lyra said, tears forming in her eyes. By the same people who left me to die. Derek stood up and walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him, tired and worn. I know what it's like, he said. Quietly, to lose everything. Lyra looked at him, surprised. You lost someone too. Derek nodded. Wife. Years ago. In the war, she was helping a wounded soldier, lay-in or human. I don't even know, but she was shot. She died saving someone she didn't even know. Lyra was silent, then whispered. She sounds like someone I would have respected. Derek smiled faintly. She would have liked you. They didn't speak for a while, just sat in silence. Two broken people in a wooden cabin, one human, one alien, both hunted by the past. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Derek's body stiffened. He grabbed his old shotgun and moved. Slowly toward the door, he looked through the crack, but no one was there. Instead, a paper had been nailed to the wooden frame. He pulled it down and read the words, Wanted, Alien Criminal. Lyra of the 03 Ward, 50,000 credits dead. Or alive. Derek's blood ran cold. He turned around and saw Lyra looking at him with wide eyes. You saw it? She asked, voice trembling. He nodded. Then walked over and slowly burned the paper in the fireplace. I don't care what they say, he said, looking into her eyes. No one's collecting any reward while you're under my roof, Lyra. Stared at him, shocked. You're protecting me? Even after reading that? He shrugged. Maybe I'm just as crazy as you are. Then he added, or maybe I don't trust people who leave others tied to train tracks for the first time in days. Lyra let out a tiny smile. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning of something, not just survival, but trust, and maybe something more. Lyra sat by the window, wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the wind move through the trees. The bruises on her arms were fading slowly. But some pain stayed deep inside, not the physical pain that would pass. It was the other kind, the one that left invisible scars. The kind that lived in the heart. Derek moved around the cabin quietly. Cooking something on the old stove, the smell of food filled the air: eggs, bread, and some herbs he had grown. He didn't say much, and neither did she, but there was comfort. In the silence, like two people who didn't need words to understand each other. Outside, the birds chirped softly, unaware of the war that raged inside Lyra's soul. She touched the spot where the chains had dug into her skin. Even though she was free now, she still felt trapped. She still heard the laughter of her own people, the words of betrayal, the cold voice that said, "Your child will be raised without a traitor for a mother." Her fingers tightened into a fist. She wanted to scream, to fight, to tear something apart, but all she did was whisper one name: Sylvie. Derek turned and looked at her. "Your daughter?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes full of sadness. "She's only 5, she said, still soft, still afraid of the dark. They took her because they knew it would break me." Derek walked over and placed a plate of food in front of her. She looked down at it, then at him. "You don't have to feed me," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." She gave a small, weak smile, then started eating. It was the first real meal she'd had in days. Each bite warmed her body, but did little to calm the storm inside her. When she finished, she looked at Derek again. "Why do you trust me?" she asked. "You barely know me." Derek sat across from her, arms folded. "I don't trust easily," he said, "but I trust my eyes. I saw a mother begging for her child, not a monster. I saw someone left to die like trashes, someone who still had tears in her eyes." Lyra's throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She was tired of crying. Instead, she asked, "Have you ever been hunted?" Derek didn't answer for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," he said, "in a different way, after the war. People blamed me for things I didn't do. I ran. Until I ended up here." Lyra looked at him with a new kind of respect. "Then you know what it feels like?" He nodded. "To lose everything." Yes. Later that afternoon, Derek opened a small metal box from under the floorboards. Inside were tools, wires, scanners, and devices Lyra had never seen before. "What's all this?" she asked, walking over. Derek replied, "Things I kept hidden from the war. I used to build communication towers. Maybe we can use this to track your daughter." Lyra's eyes lit up for the first time. "You think you can find her?" "I can try," he said, "but we'll need something from Hardy NA. A photo? Anything." Lyra reached into the pouch tied to her waist and pulled out a small necklace. It was shaped like a glowing crystal. "My daughter wore this every day," she whispered. "It holds a sample of her life energy." Derek took the necklace carefully and began scanning it. Lyra watched his hands move like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Focused, patient, quiet, signals. "Weak," he muttered, "but not dead. I think I can trace it if I boost the signal with the tower on the ridge." He looked up at her. "But it'll take a day, maybe 2. Lyra nodded. "I can wait," but inside she was burning. Every second that passed meant her daughter was still in the hands of cruel people. And that tore her apart. As night fell, Lyra sat alone again, staring at the stars. She whispered her daughter's name over and over like a prayer. Suddenly, she heard a crack in the woods. She stood quickly, body tense. "Who's there?" She called. Derek came running from behind the cabin. Holding a flashlight, they both pointed their lights into the trees and saw movement. Two men in black gear stood half hidden in the bushes, watching silently. Then one of them spoke. "Turn over the alien, and no one gets hurt." Lyra's heart dropped. They had been found. She stepped back, but Derek stood in front of her. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly. "You don't want to do this." The men pulled out weapons. Glowing red with alien energy, Derek stared them down. "If you want her," he said, "you'll have to go through me." The forest held its breath. The night grew darker, and Lyra realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone was willing to fight for her, even if it meant risking everything. The next morning came with thick fog. The sunlight struggled to break through the gray sky. Derek stood near the ridge, finishing adjustments on a small metal box. It was an old signal amplifier, but with the crystal from Lyra's daughter. It had one job: to trace her location. Lyra watched from behind, heart pounding. She didn't speak, just waited. Her fingers clutched her daughter's necklace, whispering silent prayers into the wind. Finally, the box beeped. Derek looked at the screen. "I've got something," he said. Lyra rushed to him. "Where?" "Tell me." "There's a facility," he said, "about 20 kilometers north of here. Looks abandoned from the outside, but the signal's strong inside." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "That's where they're keeping her." Derek looked at her and nodded. "Then we're going," he said. They packed quickly: flashlights, tools, one weapon Derek kept hidden since the war, and food. Lyra took a long blade made of Xyrith crystal. Her people's weapon, light but deadly. Derek led the way through the forest trails. No roads, no maps. Just instincts and years of surviving alone. Hours passed, their boots sinking into muddy ground. The trees whispered above them, and creatures moved in the shadows. Lyra didn't complain. Even when her legs started to hurt, her mind was only on Sylvie, her daughter. Her life, her light. Finally, they reached the edge of a cliff. Below them stood the so-called abandoned facility. It looked broken, walls cracked, roof half gone, but behind the ruins, sharp towers rose, blinking red, hidden in plain sight. Derek whispered. He pulled out binoculars and scanned the area. "Guards," he said. "Not many outside." "But I bet it's heavy inside, underground," Lyra replied. "They always keep the real things below." She knew how her people operated: clean above, cruel below. "There's an old maintenance tunnel," Derek said, pointing. "Probably leads under the building." Lyra looked at him with surprise. "How do you know that?" "I helped design these places," he said. Without pride, she didn't say anything, just nodded. As night fell, they moved, crawling through mud and broken concrete. The tunnel was tight and cold, filled with old cables and spider-like creatures. Derek's flashlight flickered, lighting their way inch by inch. Every sound felt louder down here, every drip, every breath, every heartbeat. After what felt like forever, they reached a metal grate. Derek used his tools to unscrew it slowly. On the other side was a hallway. Quiet, too quiet, they slipped out carefully. Stepping into the belly of the enemy's fortress, the lights were dim, blinking red, and security cameras rotated slowly. Lyra took the lead now, her body moving like a shadow. She motioned for Derek to stop as a guard walked past. She waited, then knocked the guard out in silence, dragging his body into a closet. Derek stared at her, impressed. "You really were one of them?" he said. She nodded. "I had to learn how to survive before they turned against me." Finally, they reached the chamber, thick glass walls, strange machines humming inside. And in the center, Sylvie, floating in a glass tube, eyes closed, wires attached to her arms. Lyra's heart cracked open. Her daughter was alive, but barely. She's in stasis, Derek said, checking the machine. They've slowed her down, probably testing her. Why? She's just a child, Lyra whispered, holding the glass. They don't care, Derek said, his voice full of disgust. To them, she's just a source of alien energy. We have to get her out, Lyra said. Derek nodded. Then started working on the controls. He connected wires, bypassed security codes, and carefully began lowering the energy shield. Suddenly alarms blared. Someone triggered the main door. Derek shouted, "We're not alone anymore." Guards came running from both ends of the hall. Lyra drew her blade and stood in front of Sylvie's chamber. "I'll hold them," she said. "But you get her out." Derek didn't argue. He kept working, his fingers shaking but fast. Lyra moved like a storm, slicing through the first two guards. She fought with skill and fury, every strike full of rage and love. Derek finally unlocked the chamber and caught Sylvie as she collapsed into his arms. "She's light," he whispered. So small, he turned and saw Lyra bleeding but still standing. "Let's go," he shouted. They ran, Sylvie in his arms, Lyra covering their escape, down the hallway, back through the tunnel, hearts racing, alarms still screaming above. When they reached the woods again, the night sky had never looked so wide. They collapsed under the stars, panting, exhausted, but together. Sylvie lay between them, breathing gently. She was safe for now. Lyra looked at Derek with eyes full of something deeper than thanks. "You didn't have to do this," she said. He replied. "You didn't have to save that human child long ago, but you did. Now we're even." But in both their hearts, they knew this wasn't the end. The enemy would come again and again. But they also knew something stronger had started here. Trust, loyalty, and maybe something even more powerful. The forest was silent again, but not peaceful. Every rustling leaf felt like a warning. Derek sat on the ground, holding Sylvie close to his chest. The little girl was breathing, her eyes still shut, but her body was warm now. Lyra crouched nearby, her back against a tree, blade still in her hand. Blood dripped from her side, but she ignored it. She was only watching her daughter, her fingers trembling slightly. "She's alive," Derek said softly. Lyra nodded without blinking. "She was always strong," she whispered. "Stronger than me," but inside, she felt something else rage. The faces of the guards who trapped her, the scientists who used her daughter like a test subject. They burned inside her mind like fire. She wanted to scream, to destroy. But right now, her daughter needed her to stay calm. Derek looked at her injury. "You're bleeding bad," he said. "Let me take care of that." She shook her head. "I've had worse." "Not recently," he muttered, tearing part of his shirt into a bandage. He crawled over, wrapped the fabric around her waist gently. His hands were rough, but careful. Lyra flinched, but said nothing. "We can't stay here," Derek said after a moment. "They'll come looking." Lyra nodded, eyes still locked on Sylvie. "I know," she said, "but we're not running anymore." Derek looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, standing slowly, "I'm done hiding." "They crossed the line when they touched my child." Her voice was cold but steady. There was no fear, now only fury. Derek saw it in her eyes. This wasn't the same broken woman he had rescued from the train tracks. This was someone who would burn the world for her daughter. "What's your plan?" he asked. "There's a data center," she said. "Behind the lab, it holds names, locations, everything. If we hit it, we end their program and free others like Sylvie." Derek hesitated. "It's too risky," he said. "They'll be expecting something." "Good," Lyra said, gripping her blade tighter. "Let them that night." They built a small shelter from branches and leaves, hidden deep under a rock shelf. Sylvie slept between them, her breathing calm. Derek tried to rest, but his mind was spinning. He had lived alone for so long, avoiding everyone now. He was in the middle of a war with an alien woman and her half-conscious child beside him. He looked at Lyra, who sat awake, watching the stars. She hadn't slept since. "They escaped. You should close your eyes," he said gently. "I can't," she replied. "Not while she's still in danger. She's safe now." Derek said. "No," Lyra whispered, "not until they're gone for good." Early morning came with heavy clouds and cold wind. Derek checked his gear, recharged his tools. Lyra sharpened her blade. They moved quietly, leaving Sylvie hidden under the shelter with emergency food and a blanket. "She'll be okay?" Derek asked. Lyra nodded. "I locked her heartbeat in the necklace. If anything goes wrong, it will flash red'll know." They reached the edge of the facility by sunrise. The back wall was half-ruined, perfect for a silent entry. Derek cut a hole in the fence and they slipped in, shadows under the steel sky. Inside, the data center glowed with blue light. Dozens of computer panels blinked, storing secrets, lives, and crimes. Lyra moved fast, disabling guards with silent strikes. Her anger gave her speed, her pain gave her strength. Derek hacked the main terminal, his fingers dancing across the keys. "I've got names," he whispered. "Dozens of children. They're keeping them in different labs, different planets." Lyra's face turned pale with rage. "We can end it," Derek said. "Shut it all down from here, then do it," she said coldly. "Burn everything." But just as he started the sequence, a metal door slammed open, blinding. Light filled the room, and from it stepped the last person Lyra expected. Siren, her oldest friend. "Lyra," Siren said, voice filled with fake sorrow. "You were supposed to die. You betrayed your people." "No," Lyra replied, stepping forward. "You betrayed me. You betrayed every mother, every child." Siren smirked. "This is bigger than you. We're building something better." "You're destroying lives," Lyra snapped. "You chained me to a train track. You tortured my daughter." Siren raised a gun, aiming it at Derek, but Lyra was faster. She charged forward, blade flashing, and struck. Siren screamed. As the crystal sliced through her weapon, cutting her arm, the guards behind her opened fire. But Derek hit the shutdown button. The power grid exploded. Alarms flashing red in the chaos. Lyra tackled Siren to the floor. "You don't get to speak for us anymore," she hissed. Derek grabbed the hard drive and shouted, "We have to go now." Lyra stood up, leaving Siren unconscious. They ran through smoke and sparks, dodging gunfire. Back into the forest, hearts racing, the mission complete, but far from over. As they reached the shelter, Sylvie's necklace glowed soft blue. She was safe. Lyra collapsed beside her, exhausted but alive. She held her daughter close, whispering, "It's over for now." Derek sat nearby, staring into the trees. He knew it wasn't the end. But something had changed in all of them, especially in Lyra, the mother who once cried in silence. Now stood with fire in her heart. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a storm. The wind howled across the forest floor. Leaves danced in the air like ghosts. Derek stood at the edge of the old railway line, staring down the steel path that once nearly killed Lyra. Beside him stood Lyra, holding her daughter close with one arm, her other hand gripping her glowing blade. Sylvie had woken up, weak, but alive, and now clung to her mother's side, scared but brave. Derek's heart was heavy. He knew this peace wouldn't last long. The data they had stolen, files of torture, hidden labs, stolen children, was now spreading across systems. Derek had uploaded it through a hidden satellite relay just hours ago. The truth was out, and now the enemy was coming to silence it. "One last time, we can still run," Derek said quietly. Looking at Lyra, she shook her head, her eyes like fire. "No more running," she said. "They chained me to these tracks to die. Let them come here and learn what happens when a mother survives." Derek nodded. not arguing anymore. He had seen what Lyra could do, not just with a blade, but with her will. She wasn't just an alien. She was a force of nature now. They spent the next hour preparing old crates, broken rails, and power coils Derek had stored in the forest were now turned into traps. He rewired an old engine battery and connected it to pressure plates across the path. "Trip one of these," he said, "and it'll blast out an EMP burst." Enough to shut down their drones. Lyra hid Sylvie inside a hollowed log lined with soft moss. The girl cried, "Mama, don't go." Lyra kissed her forehead, whispering, "Mama will always come back." Then she locked the hiding spot and stepped back into the open. Her blade was glowing brighter than ever, like it was alive with her rage. Hours passed, the forest grew quiet. Then the sound came, engines roaring in the distance. Cutting through the trees, black ships, shaped like knives, landed one by one near the tracks. Dozens of figures poured out, armor-clad soldiers, weapons in hand, and at the front of them all, Saren, alive and furious. "Lyra?" Saren shouted, her voice carried by a loudspeaker. "You've made a mistake coming back here. This place will be your grave, after all." Lyra stepped forward, standing on the very spot where she had once been chained. Her feet touched the steel, but this time she stood tall. "I was already buried here," she shouted back. "Now I'm the one writing the ending." Saren raised her hand, signaling the soldiers to move. The battle began like thunder. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning and locking targets, but as soon as the first one crossed the trap, the EMP burst, lit up the forest. Sparks flew, machines fell, and chaos exploded. Lyra charged into the fight, blades slicing through the first wave like wind through leaves. Her body moved with power, each step filled with purpose. She wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. She was fighting for her daughter's future. Derek stood on the ridge, sniping from behind cover. His old rifle cracked with each shot, hitting targets with perfect aim. Years of silence had made him sharp. Now he fought not to survive, but to protect something he finally cared about. Saren screamed in anger, pulling out her own weapon, a black spear pulsing with dark energy. She ran down the hill, straight toward Lyra. The two women clashed with a flash of light and fury. "You always wanted to be the hero," Saren hissed, striking hard. "I never wanted to be anything but free," Lyra shouted, blocking with her blade. Steel and crystal collided again and again. The ground beneath them shook with each blow. It was no longer a battle between two soldiers. It was between two worlds, one built on power, the other built on love. Saren struck a deep wound into Lyra's shoulder. Lyra cried out but didn't fall. She pushed back with a scream, slicing Saren's side and sending her crashing into the dirt. Derek rushed forward, standing beside Lyra. The soldiers saw their leader fall in. Many started to retreat. Saren tried to rise, blood dripping from her lips, but Lyra stood over her now, her blade pointed at Saren's chest. "You took my child," Lyra whispered. "You left me to die. You don't get to rise again." But then, Lyra lowered the blade. She stepped back, looking down with a calm sadness. "No," she said, "you don't deserve my anger anymore. I won't become what you are." She turned away as Derek lit the last flare. A message to the skies above: the war was over here. Let them come and see what truth looked like, not through power, but through resistance. As the enemy ships pulled back, smoke filled the air. Lyra limped toward the log where her daughter was hiding. She opened it gently, and Sylvie threw her arms around her mother's neck. Derek stood nearby, bruised and tired, but smiling. "You did it," he said. "No," Lyra replied, holding her daughter close. "We did it, and on the very tracks." Where she once waited for death, Lyra now walked away with her child in her arms. Alive, whole, and finally free, The fire crackled gently in the middle of the small clearing. A few stars peeked through the clouds, watching from above. Derek sat on a log, carefully tightening a metal brace on one of his old tools. Lyra stood nearby, holding Sylvie in her arms. The child had finally fallen asleep, safe and warm against her mother's chest. The battle was over. The soldiers had pulled back, and Siren's reign of cruelty had ended. But peace didn't come all at once. It came slowly, like morning light creeping across the sky. And yet, for the first time in years, Lyra felt that light again. She laid Sylvie down on a soft pile of blankets near the fire, then walked over to sit beside Derek. He looked at her, a tired smile on his face, still awake. He asked, "I can't sleep," she replied. "Too much in my head." "Yeah," Derek said, staring into the flames. "Me too." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of memories, pain, and something new growing between them. "She's strong," Derek said, nodding toward Sylvie. "She gets it from her mother." Lyra gave a soft laugh. "She got your stubbornness too." Derek chuckled. "That's dangerous." They smiled, both knowing how close they had come to losing everything. "I've been thinking," Lyra said after a pause. "I can't go back to my people. They'll still see me as a traitor." Derek nodded slowly. "And I can't stay in hiding forever," she added. "So maybe I build something new." Derek looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes steady and calm. "I mean, maybe we build something together." He didn't speak right away, but his heart beat faster. He had lived alone for so long, pushed people away, hid from his past, and yet here was someone who had lost even more than he had and still wanted to build a future with me. He asked quietly. Lyra nodded. "With you. For her," she added, glancing at Sylvie. "And for ourselves." Derek looked down, his voice softer now. "I never thought I'd have a family again." Lyra placed her hand gently over his. "Neither did I," she said. "But we do now." The next day, they began rebuilding. Not just their shelter, but their lives. Derek cleared an area near the edge of the woods. He used old parts, wood and metal, to start crafting a new home. Not just a cabin this time, but a real place to live. Lyra helped every step of the way. She wasn't afraid of hard work. She chopped wood, fixed wires, even added alien energy cells to power the lights. Sylvie played nearby, her laughter echoing through the trees like music. She was healing, not just her body, but her heart too. At night, they would sit around the fire and talk. Derek would tell stories from Earth. Lyra would speak of her people, love, beauty, and sorrow, of culture and songs, and Sylvie would fall asleep between them, holding both their hands. One morning, a small ship flew overhead, a peaceful scout from another human colony. They had seen the flare Derek fired during the battle, and now came searching for answers. Derek spoke with them, showing the evidence they had recovered, the files of stolen children, the cruel experiments, the hidden programs. The officers listened, shocked and quiet, and promised to carry the message back to Earth's alliance, start real investigations, to hold people accountable, and to protect those like Lyra and Sylvie from being hunted. Again, before they left, one of the officers looked at Lyra and said, "You're welcome in our lands, if you ever want a place to stay." Lyra smiled, but replied, "Thank you. But I've already found my place." As days turned to weeks, the seasons began to change. Snow melted, grass grew, flowers bloomed around their new home. Sylvie learned to laugh again, to run through the trees, to draw pictures with her little fingers. Sometimes she called Derek Papa by mistake, and every time Lyra's eyes softened, but she never corrected her. One evening, Lyra walked up to Derek as he stood fixing the roof. She held something in her hands, a simple ring made From braided wire and crystal, she offered it to him, shy but smiling. "I know it's not your custom," she said, "but in mine. This means family." Derek looked down at the ring, then back at her. His eyes glistened. "It's perfect," he whispered, and took her hand. They didn't need a wedding or a ceremony. They had already proven their love in battle, in pain. And in healing, that night, under a sky full of stars, Lyra whispered to Sylvie, "We're safe now. We're not just survivors anymore. We're a family, and for the first time in a long, long time, the woman who was once betrayed, beaten, and left to die, now slept peacefully, not alone, but in a home built with love, with a human man, a hopeful child, and a future bright enough to light even the darkest tracks."